When the lights of the world go out and all that remains is the echo of one's own despair, when even the shadow of tomorrow abandons a man, can there still be redemption? This is the story of an unexpected encounter, and perhaps of a silent miracle. Jesus sitting beside an addict on his last night. It was a dense night, the sky shrouded in heavy clouds and the streets lit only by the flickering glow of rusty streetlights. The cold wind carried papers and broken memories, while the world seemed to sleep, except for him. There, on a dirty bench in the alley of an indifferent city, sat Matthew, a man in his 40s, with a gaunt face, unshaven and sunken red eyes hidden beneath a torn hoodie. His fingers trembled, yellowed by cigarettes and calloused by life. In the palm of his hand, clasped around a small broken pipe, lay the last crumbs of an addiction that had robbed him of everything: dignity, family, hope, and now, even tomorrow. Matthew was a shadow of himself. His empty gaze wandered between the rats scurrying along the sidewalk and the empty bottle lying at his feet. A dry sob escaped his throat, not from physical pain, but from the pain of his soul, accumulated over years of losing himself. How did I end up here? He wondered. When did I give up on being someone? What do I have left now? The weight of guilt seemed to crush him that night. He knew this would be the end, and strangely, he wished it were. But there was an emptiness, a silence greater than the pain, a silence that cried out for something. Suddenly he became aware of a presence. Beside him, sitting calmly on the same worn bench, was a man in a simple robe and bare feet, his face illuminated by a serenity that defied the darkness around him. His eyes, soft and deep, seemed to look directly into Matthew, piercing through the filth, the shame, the addiction, and seeing something he himself could no longer see. It was Jesus. Jesus didn't say anything right away. He simply reached out and with a simple gesture moved the empty bottle at Matthew's feet. The gesture was minimal, but it seemed to say it all. I am here. Matthew hesitated, somewhere between anger and bewilderment, and asked, Who are you? Have you come to laugh at me? Because not even my ghosts stay anymore. His voice was hoarse, but it carried all the loneliness of a man tired of living. Jesus simply smiled, and then he spoke. I am here because you are still precious, even now. Time seemed to freeze. Matthew closed his eyes, tears burning and unfallen, and for the first time in a long time, he felt seen. The street remained empty and indifferent, but on the small bench, the scene had become sacred. An unlikely altar amidst peeling bricks and graffiti. The cold wind blew as if trying to erase the moment, but Matthew felt, for the first time in years, a different warmth. He looked at Jesus with suspicion and curiosity. Jesus' eyes were like a mirror, without judgment, simply an invitation for him to say what he had never been able to say to anyone, not even to himself. Matthew said, Precious. Me? Look at me, man. I'm a walking failure. Everyone who ever loved me is gone. I lied, I stole, I betrayed, all to feed this place. He raised his trembling hand, showing the pipe as if it were a trophy of his destruction. He laughed bitterly at himself and continued, You know what's worse? I don't even know if I want to live anymore. Life lost its flavor a long time ago. I'm not even worthy of one last look. Jesus remained silent for a few seconds. His gaze, however, spoke louder than 1,000 words. Compassionate, profound, unhurried. Jesus answered, Matthew, he said, his voice calm, you think you're unworthy, but do you know what my Father said? Even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Do not be afraid, you are worth more than many sparrows. Matthew lowered his head, unable to hold that gaze. He thought of his childhood, when he ran barefoot down the street and laughed at simple things, and how everything had become distorted. He remembered the first time he touched that substance that promised to numb his pain. and how, little by little, the anesthetic became a prison. His heart ached, but there was something about that man's presence, something that disarmed his defenses. Matthew asked, "But why? Why are you here? What with me? I haven't done anything worthwhile. I've hurt everyone. What value can a man like that have?" Matthew's voice cracked. It was a cry of despair, not an argument. The echo of all those who, like him, felt disposable. Jesus reached out and touched Matthew's shoulder. Jesus replied poetically, "Matthew, I have come for the sick, not the healthy. I have come for those who know the weight of pain, to tell them that it does not have the last word. In the eyes of the world, you may seem defeated, but in the eyes of God, you are a son who has never stopped being loved." And then, as if the night itself understood what was happening, a dry leaf slowly fell at Matthew's feet, a broken, crumpled leaf, but still part of the tree that bore it. You feel like this leaf, don't you? Fallen, broken, without purpose, Jesus said, looking at him, but even fallen, it served the cycle of life. So is your story, even with the falls. Matthew wiped his tears with the dirty sleeve of his shirt. He confessed, "I don't believe in myself anymore, Jesus, and I don't even know if I believe in God. I prayed when I was a child, and He didn't answer. My life was nothing but abandonment, failure, and pain. Where was God when all this happened?" Jesus closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and replied, "I was there, Matthew, crying with you. I was with you in the dark, even when you couldn't feel me, because I never stopped loving you." Those words echoed like a balm and a wound, all at the same time. Matthew didn't know what to say. For the first time, he was being heard, truly heard, but there was still so much pain and so many questions. The night seemed to embrace them with its dense darkness, but there on that worn bench there was a strange glow. The wind blew with an unusual gentleness, as if even he had stopped to listen to the conversation between Jesus and that drifting man. The city, indifferent, continued to sleep, but Matthew's heart was finally waking up. Matthew blurted out, "You say you were there, but I never saw you. I searched. I asked for help. In my childhood, when violence knocked on the door, in my youth, when I was thrown into the streets, in the solitude of each dawn when I used this place to forget." He lifted the cracked pipe again, this time with less anger, more sadness. Matthew swallowed hard. Tears burned his eyes, but he wouldn't back down. He wanted it all to be heard all at once. "Why, Jesus? Why didn't you appear sooner? If it's true that you love me, then why did you allow my life to become this void, this trash that I am today?" It was the voice of human pain, ancient and universal, the lament of someone who no longer carries only the wounds of the flesh, but the wounds of the soul. Jesus, still serene, looked at Matthew with unwavering tenderness. He responded with compassion. "Matthew, how many times has God's love called you, but you, blinded by pain, couldn't hear? How many kind faces have passed your path, and you looked away, believing you didn't deserve to be loved?" Jesus then closed his eyes and in a soft, deep voice quoted, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and dine with him." Jesus leaned forward slightly, and with a symbolic gesture pointed to Matthew's chest. He said, "The door was never closed on this side, Matthew. It was always you who held the latch, bound by guilt, pain, and hopelessness. But even now, even on this last night, I am here, and I am knocking." Matthew confronted his guilt. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words, and said, "But what about the guilt, Jesus? I caused pain to everyone who crossed my path. My mother died sad with me. My daughter hates me. My friends have abandoned me. And me, I can't even stand myself anymore. He lowered his gaze, staring at his own dirty, calloused hands. It was as if his hands told the story of everything he had destroyed. Jesus touched those same hands with a gesture of reverence, as if touching something sacred. Jesus spoke about forgiveness. Matthew, listen. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about freeing your heart from the weight that weighs you down. Don't think you have to be perfect to deserve forgiveness. Forgiveness is grace. Grace is love that you can't buy, earn, or deserve, but that is still given. Jesus then spoke in a firm voice, yet filled with tenderness. The prodigal son returned home dirty, hungry, broken, but his father welcomed him with open arms. Such is the heart of God. At that moment, a raindrop fell on Matthew's face, then another, and another. But it wasn't a furious downpour. It was a gentle rain, washing slowly. The water ran down Matthew's scarred face like tears, or perhaps like a baptism. Jesus looked up and smiled. He said, "Even the rain knows when it's time to wash the soul." Matthew looked up and for the first time took a deep, unhurried breath. There were more questions. There was still unspoken pain. But something was beginning to open. A crack. Small kachen, but true. The gentle rain persisted, trickling down the narrow streets as if the entire city were washing away its sorrows on that silent night. The breeze carried the scent of wet earth, and for a brief moment Matthew didn't feel alone. Jesus stood there, patient and present, not as a judge but as a friend, as an older brother, as the one who had never abandoned him, even when he couldn't see. Matthew asked, "Jesus, if forgiveness exists, if you're really here with me now, then tell me, what's all this for? Why suffer so much and yet in the end up alone and defeated? What's the meaning?" It was the question that echoed in so many hearts around the world. What is the meaning of pain? What is the meaning of existence itself when everything seems to fail? Jesus didn't answer immediately. He bent down, picked up the dry leaf that had fallen earlier, and carefully placed it in Matthew's trembling hands. Jesus replied, "Matthew, this leaf lived. It served the tree, sheltered birds, received the sun and the rain, and when it fell, it still nourished the earth. You lived, even hurt, even tired, even wrong. You loved, laughed, walked, dreamed, but above all, you were free. Even now, on this last night, you are free." Jesus then looked deeply into Matthew's eyes and continued, "Freedom is the greatest gift. The freedom to choose love or loneliness, to open the door or stay locked away. But listen, Matthew, no matter how many wrong choices you've made, today, there's still time to choose again." Matthew reflected on freedom. Those words moved him deeply. He said, "Choose again." But choose what, Jesus? At this point, my life is already over. I'm just waiting for death to take me. I no longer have a future. Jesus leaned forward slightly, letting the rain fall on his hair, and in a calm voice said, "Matthew, the future isn't just tomorrow. Sometimes the future is now. What you choose now is more important than all the past." The thief on the cross beside me, he only had an instant, but that instant changed everything. Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. At that instant, a distant bolt of lightning briefly illuminated the dark sky, casting shadows and lights across Matthew's tired face. And he, for the first time in years, smiled. A small, shy smile, but genuine. Matthew asked again, "Do you really think there's still a place for me?" Jesus opened his arms and looked around, at the dark streets, the abandoned buildings, the forgotten alleys. He said, "There is always a place, Matthew, because the kingdom is not for the perfect, it is for those who accept being found, even on the last night." The rain now completely drenched them both, But there was no longer any cold. There was no longer any rush. There was only eternity concentrated in that moment, in that dialogue, on that dirty bench which had become sacred. Matthew took a deep breath, closed his eyes and said, "Then, perhaps I will choose to open the door, even if it is late." Jesus didn't respond with words. He just smiled and remained beside him. Time seemed suspended. The rain, now lighter, transformed that forgotten alley into a kind of silent sanctuary. The flickering light of a street lamp reflected in the puddles, as if the ground were dotted with small mirrors, and each mirror somehow bore witness to that intimate and eternal scene. Matthew remained motionless, his eyes closed, feeling the weight and lightness of that moment. Jesus was still there, sitting beside him. There was no rush. There was no condemnation, just presence. It was Matthew's last night, and yet, or perhaps because of it, there was still a choice. The choice to open one's heart, even for the first time, even if it was too late in the eyes of the world. Matthew opened his eyes slowly, took a deep breath and spoke, his voice hoarse and fragile. "I don't know how to pray anymore, Jesus, but if there's still time, I would like to be found." Jesus smiled, leaned gently toward him and replied, "I never stopped looking for you, Matthew, and now you have allowed me to enter. That is enough. Nothing you have done before can stop God's love from touching your soul now." Then Jesus, with infinite gentleness, took Matthew's calloused hand and held it in both of his. It was a simple gesture, but one laden with all the promise of redemption. The rain, which had once seemed like sadness, now seemed like a blessing. It washed Matthew's face, washed his hands, washed away his guilt. There, on the forgotten bench in a random alley, a man defeated by addiction found peace. The wind died. The night grew even more silent. And then, with a final breath, Matthew departed. But he departed in peace. And in the darkness of that place there was now a soft glow, a light almost imperceptible, but true. Matthew's soul had been embraced. Because, even on that last night, grace could still reach. Jesus slowly rose, looked up at the overcast sky, and said softly, as if speaking to everyone, not just Matthew, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And then he walked into the darkness. But the darkness was no longer so dark. That wasn't just Matthew's last night. It was also the night he finally chose to open the door. And if there's one thing this story reminds us of, it's that it's never too late to be found. And you? Which door are you still keeping closed? What choices will you leave for tomorrow? Share in the comments. What are your own questions, anxieties, theories about the meaning of life, pain, freedom, and redemption? Your story matters too. Your story deserves to be heard too.